Welcome to All-Time Epic Stories. Today, we present the secret history of Rome's gladiators, beyond bloodsport to strategy. Forget everything you think you know about gladiators. The roar of the crowd, the clash of steel, the spray of blood across golden sand, these are merely the surface of a far deeper story. Beneath the spectacle of the arena lay a world of calculated strategy, refined technique, and tactical brilliance that would rival any military campaign. This is not a tale of mindless slaughter, but of warriors who transformed survival into an art form, where every movement was measured, every breath calculated. Our journey begins not in the arena, but in the shadow training halls where legends were forged, the ludus, Rome's gladiatorial schools. Here, beneath the watchful eyes of the lanista, the master trainer, men learned that intelligence would serve them better than brute strength alone. The ludus operated as both prison and academy, where slaves, criminals, and volunteers alike were transformed into tactical fighters. Each morning began before dawn, when the sand was still cool and the city above slept, unaware of the discipline being forged below. Physical conditioning came first, not the bulk of a common soldier, but the lean, efficient muscle of a predator designed for sustained combat. They ran miles through the streets of Rome while citizens still slumbered, building the endurance that would mean the difference between victory and death. But physical prowess was merely the foundation. The true education began with understanding the classifications, the types of gladiators, each with unique advantages. The murmillo, with his heavy rectangular shield and gladius, embodied the strength of Rome itself, disciplined, fortified, methodical. His fish-crested helmet symbolized not decoration but identity, a psychological weapon that announced his role before the first blow was struck. Against him often stood the retiarius, the net fighter, armed with trident, net, and dagger, the gladiator who embodied fluidity over force. The retiarius fought nearly naked, sacrificing protection for mobility, betting everything on speed, precision, and the element of surprise. This matchup, murmillo versus retiarius, represented more than combat. It was a philosophical debate rendered in steel, armor versus agility, tradition versus innovation. The Thraex brought a different approach entirely, wielding a curved Sicca sword that could hook behind an opponent's shield. His high-crested helmet and heavily armored legs spoke to a warrior designed to frustrate and outmaneuver heavily defended opponents. Then came the hoplomachus, the spear fighter, whose weapon granted reach advantage that could control the rhythm of entire battles. Each classification was not random assignment but strategic selection, matching body type, temperament, and natural talents to fighting style. A tall, lean man with quick reflexes might become a retiarius. A stocky, powerful fighter would don the armor of the murmillo. The training regimen for each type was meticulously designed, passed down through generations of trainers who had themselves survived the sands. Wooden swords, the rudis, were used in endless drills, their weight deliberately greater than real weapons to build strength and precision. Against the paulus, a 6-foot training post, gladiators repeated strikes thousands of times, perfecting angles, timing, and distance judgment. But the true sophistication emerged in tactical training, where gladiators learned to read opponents, anticipate movements, and exploit weaknesses. They studied footwork patterns, not just how to move, but when and why, understanding that positioning could negate an opponent's primary advantage. A retiarius learned to maintain distance, using the arena's full space, forcing the murmillo to chase while exhausting his stamina. The murmillo, conversely, was taught to cut off angles, use his shield to compress space, turning the vast arena into a confined battleground. Trainers emphasize the psychology of combat, projecting confidence, reading fear in an opponent's eyes, using the crowd's energy as a weapon. Specialized trainers, former gladiators themselves, taught the secrets of each weapon, knowledge earned through blood and survival. The net of the retiarius was not merely thrown, it was cast with the precision of a fisherman, weighted edges seeking to entangle specific limbs. A skilled retiarius could read defensive posture and predict which arm would rise to block, casting the net to exploit that very reaction. The trident was never swung wildly but thrust with surgical precision, aimed at joints in armor, at the eyes behind a helmet's grill. Murmillo gladiators mastered shield work that transformed defense into offense, using edges to strike, weight to unbalance, surface to blind. The gladius, Rome's iconic short sword, was designed for the brutal efficiency of close combat, and gladiators elevated its use to artistry. They learned to thrust rather than slash, to target vital points with minimum movement, conserving energy for sustained engagements. The Thraex's curved sicca required entirely different biomechanics, using drawing cuts that could bypass traditional defenses. Training included understanding armor, both your own and your opponent's, knowing where protection was strongest and where vulnerabilities lay hidden. They learned that the gaps between helmet and shoulder guard, between breastplate and belt, were targets worth more than any dramatic swing. Physical conditioning went beyond strength. Gladiators trained flexibility, able to twist away from blows that seemed unavoidable. They practiced falling safely, rolling to absorb impact, turning apparent defeat into a tactical reset that could surprise an overconfident opponent. Balance training was paramount. Fighting on sand required different footwork than solid ground, and mastery meant adapting to shifting terrain. Mock combats, the training battles between gladiators, served as laboratories where techniques were tested and refined without lethal consequence. Trainers watched these encounters with tactical minds, noting which combinations of moves proved effective, which left openings to be exploited. Between the physical training came the mental preparation, visualization exercises where gladiators mentally rehearsed entire fights. They learned to control fear, to channel adrenaline into focus rather than panic, understanding that a calm mind could see opportunities others missed. The lanista taught that combat was ultimately about decision-making under pressure, choosing the right technique at the right moment. Veteran gladiators shared stories of arena encounters, each tale a case study in tactical thinking, in adaptation, in the split-second choices that determined fate. They learned about the arena itself, how sand could be kicked to blind, how walls could be used to limit an opponent's mobility. They studied how the sun's position changed throughout a day's games, how shadows could aid or betray, how heat affected stamina. The social contracts that governed gladiatorial life were as complex as any Roman law, unwritten but universally understood. New arrivals learned quickly that survival meant more than individual skill, it required understanding your place in a complex social hierarchy. Veterans commanded respect not through brutality but through demonstrated mastery, their scars earning them status that no amount of posturing could match. Gladiators formed bonds deeper than friendship, they were brothers in a profession where tomorrow's opponent might be today's training partner. The ludus developed its own code of honor, rules about how to fight, when to show mercy, how to die with dignity if fate demanded it. They understood that each man's performance affected the reputation of the entire school, creating collective accountability. The relationship between gladiator and lanista was nuanced, part master and slave, part coach and athlete, part investor and asset. Successful Lannistas understood that fear bred mediocrity, while respect and fair treatment produced champions willing to excel. Gladiators could earn peculium, personal money, through victories, creating economic motivation beyond mere survival. Some saved for years to purchase their freedom, turning each arena appearance into a calculated investment in their future. The wooden sword, the rudis, symbolized freedom granted for exceptional service, the ultimate goal of many gladiatorial careers. Match selection itself was a strategic art, with Lannistas carefully choosing opponents to maximize victory chances while satisfying crowd expectations. They understood crowd psychology. Certain matchups drew larger audiences, certain gladiators had followings that demanded specific spectacles. Star gladiators became commodities, their appearances scheduled like modern sporting events, with fans tracking their records obsessively. Medical care in the ludus was surprisingly advanced, with specialized doctors understanding that healed fighters were profitable fighters. Diet was carefully controlled, high protein, moderate carbohydrates, designed to build the exact physique required for sustained combat. Rest and recovery were mandated. Trainers knew that exhausted fighters made fatal mistakes, that strategic thinking required a sharp mind. The night before a fight brought rituals. Some gladiators prayed, others meditated, each preparing mentally in their own way. The morning of combat, there was the final equipment check, every strap tested, every edge examined, nothing left to chance. Walking to the arena, gladiators employed mental techniques to control nerves, focusing on breath, on technique, on the training that defined them. The crowd's roar as they entered was overwhelming, but trained gladiators used it, letting the energy fuel focus rather than scatter it. The initial parade, the pampa, was psychological warfare, each gladiator displaying confidence, measuring opponents, reading the crowd's favor. Those first moments in the arena, before combat began, were for final strategic assessment, noting wind direction, sun position, sand conditions. The salute to the emperor or sponsor was formalized ritual, but also a moment to steady breathing, to center oneself before chaos. When combat began, all training compressed into action, the first exchange revealing strategy, probing for weakness, establishing tempo. A murmillo would advance methodically, shield forward, using armor to absorb initial attacks while assessing the opponent's speed and skill. The retiarius would circle, testing distance, threatening with the net to provoke reactions, learning patterns before committing to the throw. Experienced gladiators could read exhaustion in an opponent's stance, in the micro-hesitations that signaled failing stamina. They understood that the crowd's reaction could reveal openings. Cheers often meant a successful strike that the opponent might not yet feel. Tactical adaptation mid-combat was the mark of a master, recognizing when a strategy failed and seamlessly shifting to another approach. The decision to press an advantage or create distance was made in heartbeats, informed by training but executed by instinct honed through repetition. When one gladiator fell, the victor's next moves followed protocol, looking to the crowd, to the sponsor, awaiting the judgment on their opponent's fate. The defeated gladiator who had fought with skill and courage might receive mercy, the raised thumb, recognition of valor over mere victory. Survival through missio, dismissal with honor, meant living to fight again, learning from defeat, adding experience to the mental arsenal. For the victor, there were rewards beyond survival, prize money, gifts from sponsors, the adulation that could elevate status dramatically. Some gladiators achieved fame that transcended the arena, their names graffitied on walls, their exploits recounted in taverns across the empire. Women of all social classes were known to admire successful gladiators, creating a strange celebrity status for men who were technically slaves. The paradox of the gladiators' existence, simultaneously the lowest and most celebrated members of society, created unique psychological pressures. Between fights, training continued relentlessly. Each victory revealed new opponents would study those same techniques, demanding constant evolution. Veterans developed signature moves, combinations that became associated with their style, both advantage and vulnerability as others learned to counter them. The greatest gladiators were those who balanced consistency with innovation, who could be studied but never fully anticipated. Some, after earning freedom, chose to continue fighting, the arena having become their identity, combat their art form. Others became trainers, passing knowledge to the next generation, transforming survival skills into systematic pedagogy. The ludus was ultimately a crucible where strategic thinking was forged under the most extreme pressure imaginable, life and death. What separated those who survived from those who perished was rarely physical superiority alone, but the ability to think clearly amid chaos. They mastered the paradox of being simultaneously aggressive and patient, decisive yet adaptable, confident without arrogance. The social contracts that governed their world, unwritten but inviolable, created order in a profession defined by violence. Modern martial arts and military tactics still echo principles first refined in Rome's gladiatorial schools, the marriage of physical skill and tactical intelligence. What we witness in the sands of Rome's arenas was not mindless bloodsport but a sophisticated combat system, where strategy trumped savagery. The gladiators were masters of a brutal art, yes, but masters nonetheless, whose legacy speaks to the human capacity to find method within madness, strategy within struggle. Their story reminds us that even in humanity's darkest spectacles, intelligence and skill could elevate violence into something approaching art. In the end, the secret history of Rome's gladiators is not one of mere survival, but of the strategic brilliance that transformed condemned men into legends. The echoes of their footsteps have long faded from the arena sands, but the lessons they embodied remain: discipline, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of mastery. If this journey into Rome's strategic warriors has enlightened you, share this knowledge. Subscribe to All-Time Epic Stories for more untold histories that reveal the brilliance hidden in our past.